A series of conversations on challenging topics which affect many of us. A few general housekeeping items, please. At the registration table, there is a voluntary, I want to stress voluntary, sign-in sheet for anyone who wishes to leave their name. Again, voluntary. There will be an opportunity for questions at the very conclusion of our presentation. For those people in person, those are easy. Simply raise your hand and we'll call on you from there. For those attending remotely, it's also easy, but I would simply ask that you choose the Q&A icon in Zoom, and that will let us know that there's a question in the queue. We'll address those at the end of the presentation as well. Masks are recommended whenever inside this city facility where social distancing is not possible. Restrooms are located right outside these doors, just to the left. And you can ask guest services at the front if you need further direction. Healthy You is a program that's very, very near and dear to my heart. The topics that we'll be discussing in the series of conversations over the past few months are ones that are very real and sensitive in nature. We've talked about depression, we've talked about anxiety, we've talked about domestic violence. We also informed people on trauma and suicide prevention, and tonight's very informative session is on the opioid epidemic to raise the awareness of that issue. These I recognize, and I'll share with you in a minute my story, I fully recognize how difficult these conversations are to have, but if they're never talked about, if we just shove them under a rug, those issues and those diseases just remain lurking and they're not treated. So for my story, just 965 days ago from today, and yes, I do count in days, a police officer arrived at my house on Saturday, August 18th of 2018 to advise us that our 22-year-old son, Danny Roberts, had died of a heroin overdose. Danny had overdosed right here in Port St. Lucie that morning after being transported to PSL Medical Hospital. Danny was in and out of a minimum of 14 rehabs and recovery centers during the 8 years that he fought his battle. His family, my husband and I, were right there along with him every step of his journey through addiction. We fought for him, we fought with him, and we fought against him. But at the end of the day, Danny is dead, and I miss him with every breath I take. Is addiction fair? Why my son caught it and others don't is a mystery to us. But I believe that Friday night, that fateful Friday night, that Dan simply didn't want to continue living like he was. He had told me several times previously, standing right in my kitchen, I remember, that he hated what he was doing to us and that he abhorred the cycle of abuse, the, a clean one-day relapse, seek recovery, detox, and then more recovery, and it was the constant cycle. He hated living like he was, and he wanted to be normal, but he could not. Danny's too short 22 years on this earth showed me one thing. Well, many things, but the concepts of nature versus nurture go completely out the window when an opioid is involved. Dan was raised with scruples and morals. He knew right from wrong. He never hurt anyone other than continuously destroying himself, both physically and mentally. Dan was inherently kind. He was thoughtful and had a wicked sense of humor. But when faced with an opioid versus getting dope sick, he turned to the lure of the opioid. I'm an avid reader. I've done a ton of reading on the subject of opioid addiction. But one of the more powerful books and factual books that I've read is entitled Dope Sick, and the author is Beth Macy. I just want to share a few facts that are cited in Ms. Macy's book. Opioids are now on pace to kill as many Americans in a decade as HIV/AIDS has since that began. There are currently 2.6 million Americans who are addicted to opioids. Dr. Mark Fishman, a Johns Hopkins researcher and medical assistance treatment provider, stated, AA is not a scalable solution in an epidemic like this. and most opioid addicts just can't do it without medical assistant treatment. He said, if an opioid addict remains sober for 1 year, she has a 50% chance of relapsing. If she stays sober for 5 years, her chance of relapse is less than 15%. In 1898, Bayer's company doctor assured his fellow physicians, and this is a quote, "I have treated many patients for weeks with heroin without one observation that it may lead to dependency." Nothing is more powerful than the morphine molecule, and once it has its hooks in you, nothing matters more. Not love, not family, not sex, not shelter. The only relationship that matters is between you and the drug. This one, the next one, really hits home for me with my relationship with Danny. The average non-addicted person's perception of the future is calculated to be 4.7 years versus an addicted user's idea of the future, which is 9 days. And that was the story of what we lived through for 8 years. And at the end of your journey, Miss Macy says, you're not going after heroin to get high. You're going back to keep from getting sick, from feeling dope sick. And I always like to bring out in our healthy use sessions, once when Dan was in remission, and that's my term, because this is truly a disease, and tonight you will find out the science and the medicine behind the disease. But when he was in remission, meaning that he was sober for more than 2 years of his 8-year battle, he and I had a great conversation when I opened the dialogue with, what do you think came first, the mental health issues or your addiction? And Danny thought long and hard before sharing his response. He felt very strongly that the mental health issue, which for him was anxiety, presented itself first, and then he began to self-medicate. As his mother, I didn't see it. Danny had been very active in sports up until his freshman year in high school, and I didn't see the anxiety and depression that he suffered. And for that, I harbored deep regrets. So you see, that's why I'm here, to learn more about mental health issues so that I can help others who may be in need. Do I believe Danny suffered trauma in his 2 short years? Absolutely, I do. Do I think that trauma impacted his sobriety and gave him a propensity to self-medicate with drugs? Absolutely, I do. Do I feel the constant 8-year battle of the roller coaster ride of sober, relapse, detox, recover, and then do it all over again pushed Danny to attempt possible death by suicide? Absolutely, I'm convinced of it. As a voracious reader, I know too well of the countless families that are really impacted, and some devastatingly so, due to trauma that they or their loved one has experienced. And now, throughout these days of COVID-19, and just prior to the pandemic, the world in which we live in is moving faster than ever before. Technology has exploded, and our means of connectivity is vastly different from how our parents before us connected and interacted with society. Many of us, due to circumstances outside of our control, feel isolated and unconnected with our loved ones, our colleagues, our associates, and this can leave us feeling depressed, out of touch, with a weary outlook on life in general. Anxiousness has become our very way of life as we wake up each morning not knowing what our day will be like given the pandemic. Finances, food security, housing, employment, all prove to be huge factors that can heighten and exacerbate anxiety in us all. And amid all of this depression and anxiety, opioid epidemic awareness is an important and critical topic that must be talked about. Being in the middle of a pandemic heightens our emotions, and they aren't always expressed in a healthy manner. And that's why I'm so very, very proud of each and every one of you who has joined us in person and via Zoom to talk about this very tough topic of opioid epidemic awareness. Will my husband and I ever be the same? Absolutely not. Every day we remember Danny for what he was to us. He was a good son who had a debilitating disease. And perhaps one day I'll be able to look back at the time that Danny did spend with us and say thank you to God for those 2 short 22 years. But for now, while I don't want Danny's life defined by his addiction, I will be stepping out to eradicate the stigma attached to opioid addiction. Maybe if we had been more open about Dan's problems, someone could have gotten through to him and us through counseling. But we didn't, and no one did. And now Danny's gone. But I hope that through awareness, I can help to save just one Danny in the future. If I can't do that, maybe by sharing Danny's experience, maybe one young man will say no to an opioid just for today. But to understand this disease at its very core, at its very essence, I am extremely pleased and proud to be able to present to you Dr. Deborah Dreyer. Deborah is the former chair of the Treasure Coast Opioid Task Force and a medical professional who will share her knowledge of addiction and the opioid epidemic awareness with us today. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Dreyer.
That was powerful, Patty. Your story always moves me, and I've heard it 20 times. My name is Dr. Deb Dreyer. I am the former Chief Clinical Officer at New Horizons and former chair and founding chair of the Treasure Coast Opioid Task Force. And I'm here today to talk to you about the science of addiction, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the signs that you have somebody who's challenged with addiction, and then what do you do about it. I'm going to start out with a little bit of the history of opioids, mostly to drive home the point that this isn't exactly a new problem, but something changed in the last 20 years that made the epidemic occur. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about the brain science, and I promise not to bore you with too many names of brain chemicals. And then we're going to discuss, as I said, the signs and symptoms, and then the treatment. So that'll be the format of what I'm going to discuss. Thank you. How did we get here? Well, they discovered in Mesopotamia, that's the Tigris and Euphrates River region, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 3400 BC, they discovered that the opium plant, and you can see it on the right, the poppies, the milk of the poppy seed is where you get opium. And it wasn't until about 1806 that they actually isolated morphine from that plant, and they named it after Morpheus, the god of dreams. In the Civil War, our Civil War, morphine was used as pain management, and that was kind of the first time we had any kind of opium epidemic, because a lot of the soldiers were hooked on the morphine, and then they went home and they were going through withdrawal and so forth, and they actually called it back at that time soldier's disease. Move forward, and Patty mentioned this, in 1898, Bayer gifted us with heroin and marketed it over the counter for coughs. It does great for coughs, but it does a whole lot of other bad things as well. Now, I'm going to fast forward another 100 years to 1988. In the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the most respected medical journals in the country, there was a letter to the editor written. And in that letter, doctors were saying, hey, we're prescribing opioids and people aren't getting addicted. Now, the importance of this is it was a letter to the editor. And now that all of us have been through COVID, we know that you have to study this stuff, and you have to do random samples, and you got to have a lot of people in your research. This was not research. It was doctors just saying, hey, people aren't addicted. Now, I'm really old, and when my doctorate's in nursing, and when I went to nursing school, we were taught that you only use, at the time it was Demerol mostly, and that you really only use it in severe pain, and you use the stuff in end-stage cancer pain or immediate post-surgical, but not just run-of-the-mill. So turn the slide, please. Thank you. About 10 years after that article was put out, Purdue Pharma And they had marketed OxyContin, but they really, really went on a rampage, and they gave every doctor's office a video. You know how you go in there and watch those kind of boring videos? And their video was, take OxyContin, and it was called, I Got My Life Back. That's so ironic. And then by 2001, the Joint Commission on the Accreditation of Hospitals said, we're going to make pain the fifth vital sign. So you go to the ER, you go to a doctor, they need to ask you about pain. And if you say you have pain, what do you think a doctor's going to have to do about it? They're going to prescribe. And that got us into the mess we're in. I'm happy to tell you, and I won't name the facility, but I had a very recent stupid accident falling out of an RV, and I sliced my leg. But anyways, when I went to the ER, they asked me if I had pain, but they did not offer me any kind of pain medicine. I wouldn't have taken it if they had, but they didn't offer. That's a step forward, I think. If you had seen the gash, you would have said, oh my gosh, she needs something. Where are you going? Back one. Forward one. Okay. And that brings us to our current epidemic. So we're prescribing every time someone says, my finger's twitching. And what ended up happening by 2010, like 2000 to 2010, pill mills were all over, especially Florida. It was practically a drive-through. You could drive down 95. They were in strip malls. You go in, you get your blood pressure taken. The doctor listens to your lungs and heart if you're lucky. And then you get a prescription for 90 days, and then you drive back up to wherever you came from up north. In 2010, the pill mills were shut down. But what happened when they shut them down is, just like the Civil War, we had all these people with issues of addiction, and they had no place to go to get their OxyContin or hydrocodone. So we ended up with an opioid epidemic because they went to the street. There was no help for them. They were addicted by means of prescription. Unfortunately for us, the drug dealers figured out how to make it even better than it was. The heroin that you buy today is not your grandmother's heroin. It's not just heroin. It's often laced with fentanyl. This slide shows you how much heroin it would take for you to overdose. But if you look at the next one, moving right to left, very little fentanyl will cause an overdose. That's because fentanyl is used two ways by medical practitioners. One is it's used in very, very end-stage cancer pain. It does relieve the pain, but it's under a doctor's order, and you're being watched very, very carefully, maybe in hospice, maybe in the hospital. It's used in anesthesia, but you don't know how much fentanyl anybody's putting in your heroin. And very often what even happens is that when the fentanyl goes in the heroin and somebody overdoses, this is really awful, but it's true, people try to find out where that person got their heroin because they want the greater high. So they rush to find that dealer as well. Carfentanil is one of the what we call fentanyl analogs. What an analog is they change an element in they might add a hydrogen or whatever. And it's actually used as an elephant tranquilizer. Imagine if you took that, what would happen to you? So carfentanil is also laced in heroin, and it is brutal. It will absolutely, you can't even see the dots of powder that it takes to kill you with carfentanil. Now, we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Officer Nags to talk about the incidents that we have and the prevalence of the opioid issue here.
So good evening. Again, we thank you for being here in the room. We thank you for being online on Zoom. My name is Officer Fred Naggs. I am a police officer for Port St. Lucie Police Department. I have been here employed for 14 years. I've been working really close with Parks and Recreation in our park system, and I got to know Patty Roberts really well, and she asked if I could come on board to help her with this, and gladly. So yes, every time I hear Patty's personal story, it definitely hits the heartstrings, and I'm here to do anything that I can for her. So we are going to go over some statistics locally that we see. And these numbers go from January of 2019 to December of 2020. And as you can see, this kind of breaks it down a little bit from age group. It breaks it down our monthly comparisons. You can see we've seen a rise in opioid-related overdoses from 2019 to 2020. In 2019, we had 93 opioid-related overdoses, and in 2020, that number went up almost a 42% increase in the amount of opioid-related overdoses that we had. And I do want to draw your attention to the small graph on the side that pretty much indicates the age groups on who we find to have an opioid-related overdose. As you can see, the 25 to 34-year-old groups, 42 in 2019 to 61 overdoses, opioid-related, in 2020. And also that 35 to 44 age group was also affected. So those numbers are climbing, and we are trying to do everything we can, bringing people on board to lower these numbers. The next slide is really just a pie chart. It kind of breaks down where we were in 2019 to 2020, and these are the deaths related to those opioid overdoses. So I do want to draw your attention to the number of deaths that we had in 2020, 25 to 2019, 22. Now the number is higher, but keep in mind that we had a larger number of opioid-related overdoses in 2020. So that number has come down, and we are working to get that number even lower. So this next slide, it talks about Narcan Administration, and Dr. Dreher will definitely go into Narcan as the medical expert, but it is a drug that we can use to help take someone out of that immediate death. So we can administer Narcan in the field. All police officers for our agency do have Narcan that we carry on duty. And as you can see, these numbers here indicate that in 2019, we had 11 incidences where Narcan was administered, 18 doses, and we saved 9 lives out of 11. And then 2020, we had 35 incidences. We administered 57 doses of Narcan, and keep in mind that we can administer more than 1 dose of Narcan. And we were able to save, out of the 35 incidences that we responded to, we were able to save 31 lives. So I believe that our 2020 Narcan usage, it reflects an almost 218.2 increase from 2019. So when we respond to opioid-related overdose calls, we are now administering more Narcan than we have in the past. So one of the things that I like to point out on this slide is, so a lot of cities, they have places of problem areas, right? We have problem areas. We don't have problem areas in our city. Unfortunately, the opioid epidemic doesn't contain itself to one area. Unfortunately, our opioid-related overdoses are spread out throughout the city. We don't have what you would consider a bad area. We have a very low crime rate for a large city that we are. But this just goes to show you from 2019, our 93 incidences of opioid-related overdoses, it's spread out. It's not in one particular area. And the same goes for 2020, when we had 132 incidences. As you can see, once again, we don't have a particular area of concern. It is spread out throughout the city. So I just, a lot of people have commented on those slides when we have shown them in the past. Again, we don't have a particular bad area. It's very spread out. It can, an opioid epidemic addiction can affect anyone from any age group, as you can see, to any population, race, sex, it doesn't matter. It can affect all of us. And then this slide here, we just kind of wanted to throw it in to kind of, St. Lucie County Fire District was kind enough to show us some statistics from this year, thus far. January, February, and through mid-March of this year. They have, January, they did 22 runs where they were dealing with an opioid-related overdose. They administered 58 doses of Narcan. And as you can see, it goes down from there, 22 runs. They did 53 doses of Narcan in February, and then through mid-March, they've had lower runs of opioid-related overdoses, but again, they're still able to administer Narcan on board an ambulance prior to them getting to the hospital, which definitely saves lives. And then at the bottom, it just shows you, again, our 3 hospitals that we have in our area that our ambulances take patients to. That just kind of gives you a breakdown of where those patients went. So, and again, I would like to turn it back over to Dr. Dreher, and she's going to kind of talk about the science behind it. Go ahead,
Officer
Patty.
Nags, may I ask a question, please?
Sure.
What happens in this city if law enforcement is called to the residence where an overdose has taken place?
So something that's changed in the last couple of years is, so I would say that 2017, 2018, we had a change in legislation. So prior to those dates, when law enforcement went to a home, obviously we were there to save a life, but we were looking for evidence of drug use, right? We weren't looking for necessarily evidence of an epidemic. We were looking for evidence of drug use. And obviously, one of our things is we want to get drugs off the street, but we also want to take the bad guys and girls to jail. So we would collect evidence at the scene, and we would use that against whomever was in possession at the time, and we would prosecute for that. So when we finally had the change in legislation, our agency responds to an overdose, opioid-related especially, and we will take care of life-saving issues. We will make sure that that person that is having an overdose gets to the hospital that they need, they get the medical care that they need. We will take that drug in, and it will be destroyed. We're not looking to, per se, arrest somebody and put them in jail. We get them the help that they need, and we are working on follow-up for that as well. So I hope that answers the question, Patty. All right. Dr. Dreyer?
Gotta lower this mic. He's a little taller than I am. So how does addiction work? I'm going to do a little bit of neurobiology, but trust me, I'm not going to make it too much or too boring or overwhelm you with neurotransmitters and such. But addiction begins in the brain, basically. I want you to take a minute and raise your right hand just like this. We're not gonna do an oath or anything. It's just a little something to help you learn about the brain. Okay. If you think of your hand as being the brain, okay, you think of this part of your hand around the wrist as being your reptile brain, or your part of your brain that controls things you don't think about. You don't think all day about breathing. You're all breathing right now, I can see that, and you're not sitting here thinking about, well, maybe you are because I just said it, but before I said it, you weren't thinking about it, right? You're not thinking about your heart rate. You don't have to tell your heart to keep beating. So that's that part of the brain. Then if you fold your thumb over, this is the midbrain, and there's a lot of stuff in there, including memory, but what's important to our discussion here is that's the part of the brain where your reward system is in the midbrain. And then if you fold your fingers over, think of that as being the cortex, or the thinking part of the brain. Now here's the important thing. Whenever somebody gets really angry and out of control, or when they're under the influence of a drug, this part of the brain kind of pops off. It's not operating anymore. You can't really reason with people when they're high or in an addicted state. And also when people are craving drugs, this part isn't operating. It's not saying, it might say you shouldn't do this, but it's not saying it's strong enough. It's this part of the brain, the chemicals in this part of the brain, that are really driving that person to those cravings, okay? That's just a little thing you can use to understand it. Now, to ensure the human body responds appropriately, like we're all sitting here, to the outside world, the brain sends rapid chemical signals through nerve cells. You all know this already. And they're located throughout the body, but of course most of them are located in the brain. And those chemicals are called neurotransmitters. And there are literally hundreds of them. And I'm only going to talk about two, okay? Now, the first one is dopamine, and this is perhaps the major neurotransmitter involved in opioid addiction. So if you take a look at that slide, what you see is the ending of one nerve not quite touching the ending of another nerve. And what happens when the brain sends signals is it's got dopamine in those little bubbles, also called vesicles, and when it's triggered, it releases the dopamine into that little area, and the dopamine finds itself to the receptor on the next cell, and then that's how the message is transmitted. It's all being transmitted chemically, okay? Yes. Now, the brain reward system is really important. That dopamine is really important. You all have it. I have it. It's important to human survival. If we didn't feel reward when we eat, or when we drink water, or when we hold babies, the human race would not have survived. We have to have something to make us feel good, that feel-good chemical. So dopamine, we have natural other neurotransmitters that make us feel good too. Like in maternal-infant bonding, it's more oxytocin, but I won't go into all of them. But the point is, the reward system is extremely important to all of us. Here's the problem. The problem is if you overstimulate the reward system. So there are two main chemicals involved in opioid addiction that I'm going to talk about, but please don't think you've got the whole lesson. There's tons of stuff out there, and it would take me till, I don't know, next month to actually explain them all. I probably couldn't anyways, but. So dopamine we talked about, it's the feel-good neurotransmitter. And the other one is norepinephrine, and that's kind of the wake-you-up transmitter. It operates a little bit more strongly during the day. It's the one that operates here. Remember our brain? It keeps your heart going. It regulates breathing. It raises your blood pressure. If it goes down, it lowers your blood pressure. You've heard of adrenaline. Think of it like adrenaline. It's really, I'm calling it norepinephrine. The old word was noradrenaline. So there you go. Okay. Now, when you shoot heroin or however you ingest it, OxyContin, whatever, you ingest it and it binds to those receptors. So remember I showed you the picture where the bubble, the vesicle releases dopamine? Well, that's your body doing it in a regulated way. Here, you just got it running all through, and it just attaches to all those receptors, and it says, wow, I feel great. And it makes you feel really, really good. You just feel great. That's what people tell you. It's practically ecstasy. But when excess dopamine is released in the presence of drugs, the body adjusts by decreasing the amount of its natural dopamine because it says, whoa, wait, that was way too much. That exploded. I don't need that much. So what happens is over time, as you continue with your addiction, you don't really, whenever you're not taking the drug, you feel actually more depressed. You don't feel rewarded when you do things that used to feel rewarding. People describe themselves as being flat, depressed. So essentially, you've had this couple of really big highs, and then after that, it's not doing for you what you need it to do. Next. The second one is, second one. Oh, okay, we're all right. I'm sorry. When opioids are ingested, they bind to the receptors, and the neurons that release norepinephrine into this part of the brain are what we call suppressed. So the norepinephrine that keeps you awake and keeps your blood pressure going and keeps your heart beating and regulates your breathing is suppressed. It's not pumping out and keeping you awake and keeping you alive. So you feel drowsy, your blood pressure goes down, and your breathing slows. So that's what happens when you take these opioids. You feel really, really good, and you feel really, really calm. The problem is when they're suppressed and the body isn't able to distribute norepinephrine, when you're not taking the drug any longer, your body says, wait a minute, I got to breathe better. My heart needs to beat better. And so it produces way too much norepinephrine, and then you end up with the jitters, anxiety, muscle cramps, diarrhea, hyperventilating. So that's what the body does when it tries to regulate. You stay on these drugs, and when they wear off, the dopamine goes down, so I don't feel very good, but the norepinephrine goes up, and I feel jittery and anxious, and I'm hyperventilating. Do you see how that works? So I have a drive to go get more, right? Because I want to bring down the jitters and the anxiety, and I want to feel good again. So that's what happens. Your body is constantly trying to stay in a steady state. Now, the signs of opioid addiction. I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the maybe ones that I've seen or whatever. Certainly mood swings and erratic sleeping patterns, for sure. And you often see weight loss because of changes in appetite. You're going to find drug paraphernalia around, maybe, because people with addiction issues are really good at hiding their addiction and hiding their stuff and lying about it. They're pros at it. You will see withdrawal from family and friends, of course, financial issues. You might start to see legal and criminal entanglements. One of the things people do, and my late mother-in-law did this, was doctor shop. She was put on, I don't know, a million different ones, hydrocodone, Oxycontin, I don't know. And she went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to get more and more and more. And I will never forget in the last years of her life when she moved out to Arizona and she said, and this is since the epidemic, she said, I am so glad I had my stash because they're really not handing it out anymore. That's how far her addiction went. Today we have something called the Physician's Drug Monitoring Program, Pdmp. Every physician is required prior to prescribing an opioid to check a registry to see if somebody has been prescribed opioids from somebody else. And once they prescribe the opioids, they have to enter it into the registry. It's required now by law. So that's helping a little bit. You'll see lack of motivation, difficulty concentrating. The one I didn't realize is itching. You're going to see people doing this. There's a lot of skin reaction to opioids. Skin infections, frequent illnesses, abscesses on their arms from shooting. You're going to see some bruising and stuff from shooting. So those are all some of the things you might see. Now, what should you do if someone you care about has an addiction to opioids? Well, the very, very, very first thing you need to do is go get some Narcan. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But Narcan is the life-saving, overdose-reducing, overdose-flipping drug. You need to have some Narcan, and you can get it for free, and I'm going to tell you how in a minute. You should research treatment options. There are many different options for treatment, and you should make yourself familiar with them, not to ram it down the person's throat, but to know what you're going to say if it's brought up. We find that people that are in the throes of addiction, we call them in pre-contemplation. They're not really thinking about stopping the addiction. And you don't get at them by harping and nagging, but you do get at them by loving and supporting them through this. And then hopefully they might come to you someday and say, I think I have a problem with heroin. They might not, but they might. And at that point, you've researched the treatment options and you can say, well, here are some of the possibilities, right? Certainly get them into counseling to address the driving issue because as Patty pointed out so beautifully, many of these people, they're really kind of two classes. People who have become addicted because they were prescribed it and probably shouldn't have been, or they were prescribed it for too long, or people who are dealing with anxiety and depression particularly, but one of the big drivers is trauma, meaning experiences where they were abused or even went through a divorce or lived with a parent who had an addiction issue themselves, all kinds of trauma. And that's a whole topic for a different healthy use, so I'm not going to get into it right now, although that's one of my favorite topics. The other thing you can do now is help us address the stigma. This can happen to anybody. And as I just showed you, it's a disease. Once you've taken a few of these, it's out of your hands because this part of the brain has popped off. It's not working anymore. You can't really reason with people under these circumstances. It's better to get them to a trained therapist or substance abuse person that can help, if they'll go. But if they won't go, love them and support them, as I know you did. Thank you. I told you I'd talk about Narcan, and I'm going to do it now. The generic name for Narcan is naloxone. What it does is when the opioids, I'm going to use my fist, attach to a receptor to send the message, you know, oh, I feel good, Narcan comes in and it knocks it right off the receptor. So what happens is if you have an opioid attached that's telling your norepinephrine not to, you know, activate, and it's knocked off the receptor, then you're going to start breathing again. And it is a powerful, wonderful tool that we have to save lives. It puts you into immediate withdrawal. So unfortunately, I know the police will back me up on this one, and EMTs. When you come to an overdose and you give somebody Narcan, when they come to, they might vomit and all that kind of stuff, but they're also going to be pretty mad at you, probably, because you took away the high. So just expect it. Don't take it personally. It's just what they do. How do you, back up, please. Thank you. You can get Narcan at New Horizons. Yes, and Lisa has brought a box with her. When she speaks, she'll bring it up so people on Zoom can see it. In the box are 2 doses, and it's nasal spray. You're not injecting. There is injectable Narcan, but we're not giving that out. This is just a nasal spray. I mean, is there anyone in the audience that has never once had to use a nasal spray for an allergy or something? It's so easy to do. You administer Narcan simply by holding one nostril and shooting the entire dose in the other one. And if the person doesn't come to in 3 to 4 minutes, there's a second dose in that box. And you can get Narcan for free. Now, they will sell it to you at CVS or Walgreens, but it's going to cost you $100 and I don't know what anymore. You do not need a prescription for Narcan. The state surgeon general basically wrote a script to cover anybody getting Narcan because it's that important to save people's lives. When people come in for treatment, we give the family Narcan. So at New Horizons, you can just go over there in the main building that has an awning over it and walk in and ask for Narcan, and they will give it to you. They will require you to watch a 7-minute video about how to administer it, and then you're on your way. They won't ask you questions. They'll just give it to you. Now, if you want to talk to them, that's okay too. But it saves countless lives. We are also finding that many people, as Officer Naggs pointed out, require 2 or more doses. You might want to get 2 boxes. That's okay. Because of all the fentanyl that's in heroin, it's taking more doses to bring people back. Also, I do want to advise, because I made this mistake, don't leave it in your car. It's hot. We live in Florida. It will degrade the medicine, and you don't want to do that. So I think that's it on Narcan. Now, if someone overdoses, or you come across an overdose, the first thing you should always do is call 911. Just call. If you're wrong, it's okay. They'll understand. They'd rather come and save a life, and you were just wrong, right? Check for responses. Check to see if they're breathing. You can do that by putting your ear toward their nose and mouth or touching their chest and see if it's rising or not. If you've had CPR, you can give the rescue breaths. But if you haven't had CPR, that's not a reason not to do anything. You can go ahead and give that Narcan nasal spray. Because if it's not an overdose, it won't hurt them. So if I fall over in the next 2 minutes, first of all, it's because of my leg, nothing else. But if I were to fall over and you gave me Narcan and I'm on no opioids, it won't hurt me at all. It won't do anything. So you don't need to worry about giving it to someone, you know, oh, should I? Maybe it's diabetes. No, don't worry about it. Just give it, okay? After you you should give the nasal spray with the person on their back, but the minute you give it, flip them on their side. Why? So that they don't vomit and swallow and essentially drown themselves. And obviously seek immediate medical attention. One of the fears with Narcan was that it would be used, people would come back, and then they wouldn't get any help. But I told you to call 911 the first time, so they're going to come. They're going to come. And then, of course, you tell them, and then they'll take the person for appropriate treatment. Now, this looks like common sense, but it's not. And I especially wish I was talking to the teen 20-somethings about this, because this is the kind of stuff college students do. Don't leave the person alone. Just don't. You don't have to worry about Officer Nags pounding on your door and arresting you, so don't leave them alone. Please don't put them in the shower, because there's nothing about being clean that, and I mean clean like your skin washed, that is going to help that person with the overdose. They're gonna fall and crack their head, and you don't want that. Don't give them coffee, because coffee's not an antidote either. People think, oh, I'll give them coffee, they'll wake up. Nope, it doesn't work. Don't have them walk around, because they could fall over at any point, and walking doesn't do anything for you either. You see this on TV. Don't slap them or hit them or try to wake them up that way. And last but not least, and most important, please don't inject another substance, hoping that, like meth or something, hoping that that will bring the person back. That's absolutely maybe the worst thing. That's worse than a shower or coffee. Okay. Treatment. I'm going to talk about something called medication-assisted treatment. It's also called medicated-assisted treatment, depending on what seminar you're at. Go ahead. There are several drugs used in medication-assisted treatment, which I'm now going to call MAT, okay? And we call these programs MAT programs. The first one is methadone, and I'm sure there's no one watching or in this room that hasn't heard of methadone. There are methadone clinics out there. What methadone is it actually is an opioid. And you go to the clinic and you get a dose of methadone, and it replaces the heroin that you're taking on the street. Now, they are very, very strictly monitored, these clinics. And they're not a bad thing, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But they're very strictly monitored. You have to show up every day. There's a strict dose that you get. But they are really an opioid replacement. There are some people who just, other stuff doesn't work. This is better than dying. It is better than dying. My daughter-in-law's brother had an opioid addiction, and he went through Suboxone and Vivitrol and everything else. He's been on methadone now for 5 years and functioning and doing well. So it does work, and it is helpful. A lot of people look down on methadone clinics. Please don't. I mean, if you have diabetes, you got to take insulin. Well, there are other drugs too, but you may get to the point where you need insulin. Nobody's looking down on you because you need insulin, right? This is a disease too. It's a disease by the fact that it changes the chemistry of your brain. And nobody who takes that first dose thinks, oh, I'm going to get a brain change and I'm going to end up spending 10 years in the gutter. They don't think that. And certainly when you go to the ER, if they had given me an opioid when I fell out of the RV and I didn't know any better, I could have taken it and become in the same boat as all these people, right? So that's methadone. Suboxone. This is my personal favorite, but don't go by me. What Suboxone is it's buprenorphine, and they throw a little Narcan in it as well. So the buprenorphine is the chemical that binds to the opioid receptors, and it binds really strongly, but not completely. So if you look at my hand, I do a lot of these crazy hand things. if you look at my hand and that's a receptor, the opioid goes in there and covers it up. But buprenorphine attaches, but it doesn't activate as well. Do you see what I mean? It just doesn't activate it as well. But it sticks for a long time. It's a really sticky thing. So we give people buprenorphine, and they put a little bit of naloxone or Narcan in it because everybody on the street knows if you grind up Suboxone and shoot it, you're also shooting Narcan, which will knock the opioids away, right? They all know this. They know this chemistry better than I do. So buprenorphine and naloxone is Suboxone. For pregnant women, we use Subutex that doesn't have the naloxone in it. But when you go to get Suboxone, and there are many MAT clinics, I know there's one in Port St. Lucie that Lisa works at, there's New Horizons, and I'm sure there are many more across, there's a couple, there's one in India. But anyways, they will give it to you for free, or you can go to, some physicians are prescribing Suboxone now, but, and some insurances are covering it. I can't say which ones. I can't deal with the insurance industry, so I don't know. But when you go to, for instance, New Horizons to get Suboxone, they're going to provide you with medication education. They're going to teach you about the addictive process, about the Suboxone, about what to expect. They're going to get you into addiction counseling, which is a really good thing. But I need to say this. Every time I present this with a live audience, I get, how long do you stay on Suboxone? And my answer is, anywhere from a year to forever. It's, how long do you stay on your insulin? Well, for life, right? For most people. It is altering your chemistry so that your body can go back to normal. It's stabilizing the dopamine and the norepinephrine so that people on Suboxone say that it doesn't get them high, they just feel normal. And stay on it for however long it takes. There are people that say, I think I'm ready to get off, I don't want to take it anymore, just like there are diabetics who say, I don't want this metformin anymore, and they've lost weight and exercised and they're eating right, and maybe their A1C looks really good, so the doctor says, okay, we'll take you off it. Same thing with Suboxone. But it's okay to be on this drug, and it's okay if it lasts a long time. This is a medical treatment for a medical problem. Okay, I've hammered that point. Vivitrol. Vivitrol is injectable. I don't know why they named it naltrexone, because that sounds like naloxone, and it took me 6 months to remember the difference. But Vivitrol, it's an antagonist, which means it doesn't let the opioids go in there at all. And it's an injection that you get once a month. It produces a blockade. I can't even come in here and attach myself. You get it once a month. What happens, though, is it works. But last I heard, when I was still working a year ago, it was like $1,200 a shot. So who can afford $1,200 every month for the Vivitrol? Now, the state has a Vivitrol program, but it's limited. I mean, it's really hard for the providers to kind of manage how much of that Vivitrol they'll have and how much they can prescribe, because, you know, there's a limited supply of it. The other thing with Vivitrol, it is possible to what we call override it. So you could conceivably take enough heroin, fentanyl, and get yourself a little bit high, and we don't want people to do that. So we do teach them about that, and we coach them about that. The other thing with Vivitrol, and Suboxone too, if you're on it, and you're like in a really bad car accident, or you fall out of an RV, you need to tell people that you're on these medicines. You need to tell the doctors so that they will, on Vivitrol, if they give you opioids for the pain, it's not going to help. right? I know I could be wrong, but I had a police officer tell me that the EMTs in a severe car accident will administer pain medication. Is that correct? True on the spot? Right. Now, if you're on Vivitrol or Suboxone, you need to let them know that, if you can. Yeah. Okay. Next. Wow. Okay. Any questions, I guess?
I have no questions in Zoom that I can see. Anybody in person want to ask a question yet?
Okay. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
My word, if that's not an education. And how many times have I heard it? But I have, but every time I hear it, I pick up something different. And now I would like to offer out Lisa Cerveniak, who is a peer specialist with New Horizons of the Treasure Coast, and Lisa will share her experience with addiction and what she works toward.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lisa. I'm an addict and alcoholic. Everybody say hi, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. See, now you've all been to like your first AA or NA meeting. I have to move this up, Deb. Woo. Okay. Here's the box of Narcan that Deb was talking about that you can go to New Horizons and get this, okay? Walk in the front door in the front lobby and tell them that you're there because a loved one is having a problem with opiates or yourself, and they will give you Narcan. But you might have to watch the 7-minute video. Many of the insurances will pay for it also. And just one more thing. That's the first time I've ever heard Deb Dreher speak where she was not walking all around the room. Okay? She literally stayed back here behind the podium, and I've heard her talk 50 times. Very funny, but unfortunately, she really tore her leg up. So, I'm Lisa. I'm an addict and alcoholic, as I told you. By the grace of God, this summer, I will celebrate 33 years clean and sober. Thank you. It's not by my will alone, but by the grace of God and AA and a lot of therapy and going to rehab. I am also now, because Deb Dreher has stepped away, the chairperson of the Treasure Coast Opiate Task Force. I started when Deb first started the Treasure Coast Opiate Task Force 4 years ago now. And we started an ER program that took years to get off the ground. But we worked hard. We continued to chip away at it. And we have peers through New Horizons that are in recovery, people in recovery that can pass a level 2, and that are very responsible and have a passion and a heart for the sick and the lost. And if somebody overdoses, the ER will call New Horizons 24 hours a day, and they will call one of my peers or myself, and we'll go into the ER and sit down with that person. And the reason why that is such a miraculous event is because nobody totally understands us as the recovering addict or alcoholic who's suffering like another addict or alcoholic. People are, just like I was many years ago, very afraid to open up to people of authority, people even in the hospitals, the police officers, EMTs. I didn't trust people. I was scared. They're going to lock me up. They're going to Baker Act you. And when another addict or alcoholic comes in, we know that you've walked a day in our shoes and that you truly are there because you want to help. What comes from the heart reaches the heart in this case. And it's much easier for us to get that person to realize that the situation they're in is detrimental, that it's life-threatening and life-lasting, and that we have options for them to get help. And so we help connect them to whatever is appropriate for that person, whether it be a detox or a 28-day program, or if it's AA or NA meetings, or an outpatient MAT program, and help the hospital also be able to have a good, safe discharge plan, and we'll stay with that person. Now in Martin County, and we're trying to do this in St. Lucie County, but in Martin now, the EMTs will leave. If I can't get somebody into detox right away, or a program right away, say it's a Friday night at 3 in the morning, and I can't get anybody on the phone, I can't get an MAT appointment till maybe Monday or Tuesday, this person that leaves the ER now, who has been Narcaned, brought in by EMTs, and they're in severe precipitated withdrawal. Most of these people, we have to understand, don't really want to be drug addicts or even alcoholics. They're doing it to just survive. They can't make it through the day. Sometimes I couldn't make it through the morning without getting high or doing something. I would swear I'm not going to get high until 10:30 today after my son goes to school. And already at 9:15, I'm pacing the floor. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it till 10:30. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm not going to make it. By 9:30, I've already drank something or taken some kind of mind-altering substance. It's not that we really want to be addicts. We're sick. We're sick. We have a disease. And it's the only thing we know of that is going to make us feel better at the time. And then we get so bad that many times we lose hope. Nothing is going to really help us. There is no other way to function in life without this mind-altering substance. For an opiate addict, it means severe vomiting and diarrhea and curled up in a ball in the corner. And I would just my heart would be breaking all weekend trying to keep in touch with this person that I met with in the ER at 3 in the morning on Friday night. And now I'm trying to get them not to go out and use something to get heroin or fentanyl to make themselves feel better because I'm afraid they're going to overdose again and die. But they got to hold on until Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday to get in somewhere. That was my biggest complaint. Once we got the peer program going and running, was that there was this lapse of a warm handoff on occasion. Either many facilities had no beds, or the person was scared and had pets at home and wasn't willing to go in somewhere. Regardless, there was a window in there of a few days that we needed help with. So we followed a model that has been done in other states, that has been done in West Palm, and the EMTs are actually going now to visit that person every day after they leave the ER. The ER will give them some Subutex, actually, and then the EMTs will go visit them every day and give them some Subutex until we can get them into a program. So that is very exciting. That has just started today. It rolled out today in the Martin County hospitals, which is Cleveland Clinic, North and South. So we're very excited about that. So we're working on getting it done in, as the Treasure Coast Opiate Task Force, getting that done with the EMTs and the police force in St. Lucie County. The director of emergency medical services, the medical director is Dr. Kenneth Palestrant, and he's trying to put that all together now. So we're excited about that. But just looking at some of those statistics that you saw, that Officer Nags had up there, already this year, there's been over 60 overdoses in Port St. Lucie. Oh my gosh. I mean, terrible. We had over 1,000 overdoses last year in the Treasure Coast. We have one of the leading overdose rates in the state of Florida. Most people don't realize that. And there are options for these people. And if we all can just remember that many of them don't want to be addicts. They would love to have help, but they just can't think of any other way. We have to show them the way. Together we can succeed. This could be your mom. It could be your son. I have seniors I have seen in the ER now the last couple years that have gotten taken off of their pain medications and start going to the streets for heroin because their doctor just cut them off, said, nope, we're not going to give it to you anymore. And now they're getting heroin from their niece or nephew, and now they're heavily addicted and they're overdosing and ending up in the ER. 70-some years old. Moms with little kids at home, young people, kids finding their parents overdosed and calling 911 and then watching mom or dad get Narcan in the living room, or finding paraphernalia all over the house. It's become a huge, huge epidemic. So we're working hard to try to help curb that, and hopefully someday we will overcome it together, all together. But the biggest thing I want to talk about today is just giving these people hope. And that's one of the biggest things I lacked in my drug and alcohol addiction. Even though you can, like Deb said, you can't badger them to death to get help. You can't force them to go get help. I had years of people say, you know, there's something wrong with Lisa. And I didn't grow up on the wrong side of the tracks. I grew up in a beautiful neighborhood, and my father was a politician, and I had a loving family, and I was the black sheep of the family. Nobody knew what was wrong with Lisa, and you don't want to talk about what's wrong with Lisa. But I was an alcoholic and a drug addict at a young age, and I spent years relapsing until I ended up underneath a bridge getting ready to jump when they found me. And they were taking away my little boy. He was 4 years old. And from all the drugs and all the alcohol, I did so much damage to myself, but it damaged him too. He remembers some of those things. And it was terrible. And I went to get help for him. I really didn't think there was any hope for me left. I honestly didn't even care about me anymore. I hated myself. I thought I was a terrible mother. And a therapist said to me in the rehab that I got in, she said, Lisa, you're not a bad person. You're sick. You're sick. And just like as if you had chemo, you have a disease, but we can help you. You don't have to go for radiation and chemo. We can help you with these programs and with the togetherness and then the 12-step programs and therapy, and you don't ever have to live like that again. And you're not a bad mother. You're sick. And so just like Deb said, if you had diabetes, would you take the insulin? If you found out you had cancer, would you take the treatment? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. And she said, are you willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober now? I said, yes, I'll do it. So it's just about being willing, but somebody giving you hope. That therapist turned out to be a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. You see how that works? No one else could tell me how Lisa should feel or Lisa should act. Of course, I think I know better all the time. But it really was that somebody else knew it, walked it, and put their hand out to help me. And it worked. And by the grace of God, one day at a time, I've been able to stay clean and sober and then go on to help many, many, many people over the years. And so I'm very proud to head up the task force now. I'm the coordinator of all the peers in the ERs. Pat's story makes me want to cry every time, and I can't cry because I have to come up here and talk. So I hold back the tears, but God bless her. God bless, Deb lost a family member years ago. I've lost so many people to this awful disease. I lost a sponsee down in Delray in the back of a filthy, disgusting gas station 4 years ago. She overdosed and died. 25-year-old, beautiful, beautiful young girl with everything in her life to live for. And that one time could be their last time. That one time. And I see all the statistics from all of our law enforcement agencies and EMTs now on the Treasure Coast. Everything has fentanyl in it. Everything has fentanyl in it, people. Please listen to me. Even the marijuana has fentanyl in it now. We get the coroner reports. There's like fentanyl in almost every overdose that happens now. It's not safe. it never really was that safe, but now it's worse than ever. So I tell you all this, I tell you that I'm a drug addict and everything because I want to reduce the stigma of this. And I do believe that mental health problems come before me self-medicating myself all these years, and that childhood trauma is all part of it. But we can't keep quiet anymore. We all have to talk about this so that we can help others get there and to show the success. People that get on medicated assisted treatment for opiates, this is what we were doing wrong for many years. And I've watched this happen over the last 10, 15 years. I couldn't figure out why the opiates had such a high relapse rate. It was outstanding, the relapse rate. Why can't these people get sober and stay sober as much as other people on other drugs? Their relapse rate was about 85% of the time they relapsed. Over and over and over again. And it's because we were medicating them through detox and quit getting them off. Getting them off the medications, they should be fine, send them on their way, complete abstinence. Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the opiates. You have a higher chance of success. 85% your chance of success goes up if you stay on the medicated assisted treatment for at least 9 months. And Deb says a year to forever. It's the least harmful way, and if you then slowly get off of it, very slowly, you won't have all the withdrawal and all of the cravings again, and your brain will start to heal. So their success rate can go up to 85% by getting on medicated assisted treatment and staying on it. There are only a few places in St. Lucie County for medicated assisted treatment. One of them is New Horizons, and you can call. The number is 772-672-8470 is the main number at New Horizons. The MAT program specifically, if you can't get through the whole prompts in the voicemail, you can call the MAT program 672-8448. Okay, and you'll have to make an appointment and wait to get in and then go through the whole process. Pinnacle Wellness Group is another place that I work, but they have an outpatient office that's really nice off of US 1. The number is 772-222-5411. That's 222-5411. Make an appointment and get in there. You can go to AA and NA meetings. People will help you through this. And don't forget the Narcan. Go to New Horizons. And thank you all, and thank you for your efforts. Together, if we save one life, we can change the course of generations like it happened in my family. Thank you.
Huge kudos to Lisa for, I mean, you think, you really don't get how hard that is to come out in front of all these people and talk about your story. And every time I hear, especially you and your young son, it breaks my heart. And I am so proud to know you. And that your comment, especially that at that point, it wasn't even about you. It was about your kid. And that's huge. And that speaks volumes. When I talked about the 14, at least, I lost track, but 14 rehabs and recoveries that Danny was in, and it was all young men, of course, but I cannot express to you the devastation in those boys' eyes when it was usually like family visitation time, and Lisa hit on it. There is not one young man that I saw in any of those visitations who wanted to raise their hand and say, hey, this is how I choose to live. Their looks of devastation, their families were right next to them. They knew they were destroying their families. You know, what little boy in the first grade raises his hand when the teacher says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what little boy raises his hand and says, I want to be alienated from my family, I want to lie, I want to steal, I want to manipulate, I want to be a drug addict? It doesn't happen. And so that is huge, and the message of hope is what we need to remember. I do have a question in the Q&A here, asking, let's see, Nar-Anon for families and friends. Is there anybody on the panel who can answer that? I'll give you the...
Yes, hello, Nar-Anon. You can Google that for Nar-Anon meetings near me. And I believe there are some in St. Louis, I'll cross the Treasure Coast, but it's a support group for families and friends of someone who's addicted. And they'll give you support and help you through it and help you take care of you, because you're no good to anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself. So you need support and know how to handle the person who's sick, and sometimes they don't want to get help or aren't able to get help for a long time. So it's a really good program for you to go to. Definitely. It's like Al-Anon for alcoholics.
And there's one other question here, and I believe it's for Dr. Dreyer. What would a doctor prescribe for pain if a former opioid addict comes to the ER?
Probably ibuprofen, but it would depend on the situation with the pain. I mean, I can't say, because you know, everybody's pain is different and every single medical condition is different. If they had to prescribe an opioid, my hope would be, if you're on Suboxone, Subutex, that physician would talk to the MAT physician and see what might work. I think that's would be the better way to go. But they certainly don't need to give them Oxycontin or any of the really strong stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Dreyer. So I see no more questions in Q&A. No one in person that has a hand up. So I think we're going to wrap this up very, very carefully here. But some of you might be wondering, why is Parks and Rec offering Healthy You and talking about mental health issues? And we all know that traditional Parks and Rec agencies provide parks and programs for residents to enjoy their leisure opportunities. But why Parks and Rec and mental health? The reason why, for me, is very simple. It's our commitment to serving our community. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to share a couple of resources. These are free. These are simply available to you as guests to our facility. But I am going to share my screen. And if you go to our city's website, for those people in person, you have a hard copy of it. But here on the website that you'll see in the Zoom, if you'll scroll down and the people in person have a hard copy of it, please check out our publication that's called Inside the Outdoors. That's going to give you every single program, every single class that is an event that is available in the city of Port St. Lucie. So I would offer that out to you as well. And then I'm also very, very excited to share with you right now. Hey, look at Patty go. It's a brand new program. I'm so excited about it. But this coming May, for the first time ever, our department is celebrating May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we've got 9 events total, all free to the public. And there are flyers here in person, and then available on the website as well. It'll be linked through Healthy You. These flyers were just developed at, I want to say, almost close to 5 o'clock tonight. So they're hot off the press. But some of those programs, events that we're holding are going to be really cool, and they're all in our parks. They're all outdoors. So, for instance, we have a guided walk on May 1st. It's a fitness walk at Woodstock Trail Park over on the east side of town. And then we've got yoga classes at Rivergate Park and Fred Cook, and another guided walk at Woodland Trails over in the southwest section of town. Stay tuned for that, and please join us for that. Again, all free. We just ask. We don't require that people bring a canned good for donation to the Treasure Coast Food Bank. But I also want to invite everyone on the call and in person, and tell your family and friends that our next session of Healthy You is going to be held right here again and via Zoom, but we're changing it to Wednesday evenings. It'll be the first Wednesday of every month from now through December. And the next topic that we're talking about is going to be bullying. And it's actually presented by no other than our Officer Fred Nags and his colleague, Gretchen Raziella, who is a crime prevention specialist. So bullying is going to be a great topic. I think everyone here can relate to that. And again, join us for Mental Health Awareness Month as well. So, before, during, and after the current global crisis, your Parks and Rec team has been and will be hard at work for you, and we do appreciate the opportunity to present just a glimpse into what we have to offer our guests in order to thrive and prosper. And we just hope that you'll join us again for the next session on bullying. And as always, it is my honor and privilege to learn, grow, and serve every day in this city. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you to this phenomenal panel of professionals, consummate professionals, who give of their time. This is their time they're giving us to share this very important topic with us. And thank you all for taking your time to come down and hear us. Thank you and have a good evening.